Hello everyone! Today we're going to go over Unit 1, Part 2, the elements and principles of design. So let's go ahead and get started. Now that we've talked about the types of graphic design and the career options that you might be interested in later, we're going to move on to our next topic here in Unit 1, which is the elements and principles of design. In this lesson, we're going to be covering the elements of design, which are the building blocks of design. Principles are going to be how we use these elements of design in our space. So the first element of design is line. There's different types of line, but it can be defined as a moving point in space. But it can also be non-existent. If you were to point at something anywhere in the room that you're sitting in right now, you are creating what's called an implied line. That is a line that is not actually there, but carries the viewer's eye from one place to another, just like an actual line does. You can also create implied lines by repeating small shapes. Like if you think about the road, if you're driving down the road, those yellow dashed lines in the middle, they're not connected, they're not one piece in some places, but those spaces in between, those small spaces, are going to create that movement of carrying your eye through the space. A final way to create movement using that type of implied line is creating a shape that has a hard edge like an arrow. Creating that sharp edge is going to again carry the viewer's eye across your space. The next element of design is going to be shape. Shape is a flat item on your design, so you don't want to confuse that with form, which is going to be the next one, the three-dimensional type of shape. Shapes can be geometric and they can also be organic, so it's important to think about both of those as you're choosing a style of graphic design. Geometric shapes are going to be what you would think about in geometry class, like a square, a rectangle, a triangle, things that you can measure using what you would use as a geometric formula. Something that is an organic shape is going to be a shape that you find in nature. We're all organic shapes. Actually, if you divide your face in half on both sides, it's not exactly even, which is a great example of an organic shape. But if you go outside and find a leaf, same thing, right? That's going to be an organic shape. So going into form, it's going to be the same thing. However, it has volume. It's something that you can pick up. It's something that is actually existent in the space. The fourth element of design is value, and it's going to be the lightness or darkness of tones of color. You want to think about creating a nice value range in your space to create contrast. The lightest value is going to be white, the darkest value is going to be black, but you want to also think about how you can add these white and black values to your colors to create a variety of colors within your space. The space is going to be the next one. There's positive and negative space in every design, and it's important to think about your negative space just as much as you think about your positive space. The positive space is the subject, so people tend to focus on the subject and not think as much about that negative space. But if you've ever seen the FedEx logo, you'll know that the negative space in that logo is so important because it actually forms an arrow. It's not actually there, but there is an arrow formed with the letters. So thinking about the space that you're creating around or within your items that you're actually placing within your design platform is so important because you don't want to create any awkward spaces. Color is the next one. Colors are made of three properties: hue, value, and intensity. We want to think about color, very specifically the color harmonies as we're creating our designs. For example, if you want colors to contrast in your design, which means pop, right, stand out, they're highly different, they want to be across from each other on the color wheel. Those are called complementary colors. So if you think about any holiday or sports team, those are going to generally fall across from each other on the color wheel on purpose. You can also go find different color harmonies on the color wheel. one is going to be analogous, which are going to be 3 colors directly next to each other on the color wheel that flow really nicely. And you can do split complementary, which will be like complementary, but instead of going directly across, it splits the 2 next to it. As we get into more of our designs, we'll talk about more of these color harmonies, but there is a great app called Adobe Color, and I think that everybody should really give that a chance as you're planning and organizing your designs, because it really helps you pull colors together that are going to work and follow these specific color rules. The last element of design is going to be texture. Texture is going to be either actual or implied. So if you were to turn to the person next to you and touch their head, you could actually feel their hair. That's actual texture. But if you're looking at a picture of a really cute puppy on the computer, you can't actually touch that. That's going to be implied texture. Now that we've talked about the elements of design, we're going to move on to the principles. Again, the elements are the building blocks of how your space is created, and the principles is how you actually arrange those elements within the space. The first principle of design is variety. Variety is used to add interest to your art piece. So it's adding just the right amount of the elements in your design to create a space that becomes more interesting for the viewer. Contrast is going to be any extreme opposites between the elements of design. For example, going back to color that we were talking about before, the most contrasting colors or the most contrasting values will create contrast in your design to really make one pop off of the other. So the most contrasting values, again, are black and white. The most contrasting colors are going to be anything that is directly across from each other on the color wheel. Think about sports teams, holidays. Those are complementary colors. The emphasis in a graphic design is going to be whatever draws your eye in first. It makes your eye go to that design. And that can be done with contrast. It can be done with size, placement on the page. Naturally, as we look at a design, we want to go to the top left-hand corner. And if you think about it, if you pick up anything, if you're going to read it, that's where you look. In the English language, we read from left to right, top to bottom. So we're naturally drawn to that top corner. There's something that's called the rule of thirds that is going to divide the space into thirds both directions. That top left-hand corner intersection is a really great place to always put an emphasis of your design to naturally draw the eye to that space. Balance is also very important in the design. You don't necessarily have to have exactly the same things on both sides. However, you want to create even weights on left to right, top to bottom. That can be done a variety of ways. Think about if something is very heavy, maybe it is a deeper value, then you can create more items on the other side to make up for that darker value on the one side. You can also create the same shape. There's so many ways that you can do that using the elements of design. Proportion is also really important. You want to think about the spatial relationship of everything within the space. You want it to make sense. So if I was standing next to a giraffe, I don't want the giraffe to be smaller than myself, and vice versa. It's going to create interest in the design. It's going to make it look more accurate, create that depth that makes it a more interesting space. Harmony and unity. Unity is something that you want to think about. If not anything else, that's probably the most important thing because it's going to make the design look whole. It makes it all come together. It's repeating the elements of design throughout the space enough so that it looks like it is a consistent design. Again, with color as an example, if you were to use the same color throughout the design, maybe for all of the headings in a design, it's going to unify that space. Rhythm and movement are what carry your eye throughout the design. We started talking about the rule of thirds of dividing the space. Using that, you can create what's called a Z pattern or F pattern of design. There have been studies that have tracked eye movement across designs or successful designs that go in a Z pattern throughout the design or an F pattern, as you can kind of visualize. Your eye is drawn naturally to that top left-hand corner and follows the shape of the letter throughout the space. Ways to create rhythm or movement can be repeating a shape across the space. It can be creating what I was talking about before in line, an implied line. An eyesight line is a really good implied line as well. So if you have a character or an animal, something that is, an animated object in your design looking a certain direction, you're naturally going to look at what they are looking at within the space. Another way to do that, again, is creating a sharp edge, an arrow of some sort where it's going to bring your eye across and through that space. Just creating a strong visual hierarchy can help with that as well. So having your items from biggest to smallest, the most contrasting values as the most important, can really bring your eye from one piece to the next, creating that great rhythm and movement.